Hello everyone, welcome to the newest episode in this, my history series on Chinese history, whatever I call this thing. Last time we talked about the Zhou dynasty and a lot of fundamental aspects of Chinese culture, civilization that arose during that time. And we're going to continue along in that vein with today's topic, the Mandate of Heaven. Now, the idea of the Mandate of Heaven actually arose during the Zhou dynasty, and it arose out of this need, or this perceived need at least, of the Zhou to justify deposing the Shang. And you'll notice that this happens a lot throughout history, kind of all over the world. When there is a violent conflict or revolution or something to that effect, and it results in the formation of a new country, territory, government, dynasty, what have you, there needs to be a certain retelling of history. There needs to be a certain narrative told in order to appease the masses, because there's been all this carnage and all this waste, all this blood and death and all of this kind of stuff happening, and people need to believe in their new government. And no one's better at creating a new narrative or rewriting history for political purposes than the Chinese. So bam, we got the Mandate of Heaven. And as the old saying goes,成者为王, 败者为寇. The winner becomes the king, and the loser becomes the outlaw. All right, so I've said all of this, but what actually is this mandate? Let's talk about it. The Mandate of Heaven was a social and political philosophy that basically explained the rise and fall of different dynasties throughout all of Chinese history, from the fall of the Shang dynasty all the way to the fall of the Qing dynasty and just the end of the dynastic system in 1912. Now, whenever a dynasty had fallen, it was always attributed to the laws of the Mandate of Heaven, or the moral right to rule. And this moral right to rule, this power to rule, was given by heaven. And heaven alone could grant it. But when I say heaven, I don't mean personal God that watches over atrocities and genocides and football games and all that other stuff. It's just this kind of all-pervasive power that is just equally present throughout all of the universe. Kind of think about it like the Force from Star Wars. So here's how this whole thing works. You got heaven chilling up there, it's really cool, and you have this emperor down below. Now, heaven grants this moral right to rule to the emperor as long as the emperor abides sort of by a code of behavior in heaven's eye. It's kind of vague, but basically it's just like if the ruler agrees to rule benevolently, selflessly, follows the wishes of the people, and is good in general, then he's allowed to keep ruling, or she, mostly he. But if the ruler begins to behave selfishly or becomes corrupt or just does, things that are against the will of the people, heaven takes away that moral authority, then we have a change in dynasty, usually in the form of a violent uprising. So this mandate was invented by the Zhou to justify overthrowing the Shang, but why is this justification needed? Well, the king, the emperor, is seen as kind of a paternal figure, and paternal authority is kind of the glue, the cement that holds all of Chinese traditional social structure together. So if you're going to rebel against a paternal figure, then you're going to need a really good reason why. And that's what the Mandate of Heaven is for. It provides legitimacy. It provides that justification, that leeway for people to come in and overthrow the government that they saw as too corrupt, too selfish, or just not conducive to the needs of the people. Now, if you've ever taken a World Civ class, this might sound oddly familiar. It sounds kind of like the divine right of kings, doesn't it? Yeah, roughly. And we look at Chinese history and we go from dynasty to dynasty, and we see that all these dynastic changes come about because of those violent revolutions, those violent upheavals. We go Xia, Shang, Zhou, Qin, Han, Three Kingdoms, Sui, Tang, and all the other ones, and we see that this Mandate of Heaven is used over and over and over to justify, to give legitimacy to the new kings. Now, if you remember my video on the Shang dynasty, you'll remember the decline of the Shang and how at the end, its rulers were all like crazy and despotic, wasteful, corrupt, selfish, and all those other adjectives. There were rulers like Zhou and Jie who were just like caricatures of like Disney villains. It was ridiculous. Like Zhou was supposed to be sexually aroused by torture. Jie rode around on people like horses. We love to disrespect the gods, and all of these other things. Now, I mean, did these things actually happen? No, probably not. In my opinion, probably not. But were they really effective in justifying these new kings and saying, wow, look at how bad these guys were. We are awesome. You should love us. Was that effective? Absolutely, absolutely effective. And you'll notice how the end of a dynasty ends terribly with horribly corrupt kings, and the beginning of a new dynasty always begins with these amazing, perfect, selfless kings who always do what the will of the people requires them to do, and all of these other things, and they're just amazing. And that's how it works. If you are the face of the new government, you've got to rewrite history in a way that makes you look good. Did dynasties change because of this heaven looking down and giving this moral? No, probably not. All of these revolts were given this mandate of heaven treatment. They were all looked at through this particular lens. Farmers at this time didn't care about heaven necessarily, or they weren't revolting because they thought, oh, this king has lost the mandate. No, they're probably just hungry and poor and in need of a government that better suits their needs. These people who revolted were the poor, the uneducated, the illiterate, and they didn't have any kind of sense of the cosmological or spiritual implications of it all. They just wanted a government that would help them get more food or more money. That's just the way that it works. Well, looking at this idea of the mandate of heaven now, some people argue that this gives just about anyone the moral authority, the moral right, or the moral obligation to launch a fight against the government because of a personal grievance. It means any mullet from West Virginia or from Texas or Mississippi or Kentucky or wherever they're from can just launch a fight against the government because they think the government's gone too far. So who's to say when a government has lost its mandate? Where does government's power come from? Where is the line between the desires of the people and the desires of the government? And who says when the government goes too far in its quest for power? These are questions that are still getting asked, and they're still being debated, and that just goes to show that no matter what time period of history you live in, some things never change. Some things never change. And that people in power, when confronted in life or death situations, can be very, very creative. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode of Chinese History. Feel free to leave a like, favorite, and share, and subscribe, and all that other kind of stuff. Leave a comment down below. Let's talk a little bit about this subject, but please, let's keep it cordial, polite. Let's not get into any flame wars. And, yeah, I guess that's about it. So, I hope you all have a nice day, and I will see you all next time.